Okay, here we are inside of Cinema 4D, and we have a simple scene with some objects, cube, torus, and a platonic, and we're going to look at the jdDriver. So we go to Insidium, Jidou, and we're going to add the jdDriver tool. Now that we have that, what we're going to do, and what I tend to do with all of the Jidou tools, is undock this and dock it back into the UI. So I've undocked that. Let's bring it here. I'm going to dock it over here. And the reason for that is that the Jidou toolkit is quite interactive with objects in the object manager, dragging and dropping, and so it's easier to have this in its own little window. Right, so what have we got? The driver object is a tool to drive something with something else. And it's a bit more than that as well. Let's have a look. We've got these drivers. So we have built-in drivers, noise, wave, value, time, color, and a switch, and then some utilities, which we'll look at. And we'll go over these individually, but for now, driver is much more than just these built-in drivers. You can drive anything with anything. So let's have a little look at how we do that. So let's say we've got this cube, and we're going to say, I want the cube's X position to control the platonic's Y position. So we'll set that up. So I'm going to drag our cube into here, which is our drivers list. And there's two ways to access things. You can select it and add a parameter. So if we click this, you can see a big list of parameters from this object, or you can take it from the object's attributes. So I'm going to say cube's X position, drag that in there as a child. And then this position is going to then control something else. So I'm going to say I want to take the platonic's Y position, make that a child. So now if we move our cube, our platonic moves. Well, that's cool. That's a little relationship setup. Let's say we want to rotate our torus also based on that. So we'll select our torus. We'll say we're going to rotate on the bank. So we'll grab our bank channel, make that child of the Y position. So now the Y position of the platonic is controlling the rotation of the torus, not the cube. The cube is only controlling the platonic. So we move that. Now we have all three objects moving in conjunction with each other. So you have a bit more control. So say we don't want this to be able to go higher or lower than a certain range. We'll go into its options. So we'll select the Y position, and then we have all these options. So we can remap it. So let's say we're going to clamp this. So we're going to clamp it to -150 to 150. Now, no matter how far we move the cube, the platonic is clamped. But you'll also note that the torus is taking that clamp as well, because it can't go any further because this is its driver. So we don't want that. We want the torus to have its own separate control here. So let's grab it and make it also a child of the X. So now it's independent from the position of the platonic, and it will go back to having more rotation. So what we want to do is, let's say this can do 360. So we'll select it, clamp that to -360 to 360. Look. And now it's just going to do a simple 360 spin whilst that's doing that. So you can see you get loads of control. Anything can be controlled by anything else. So let's do something else. Let's grab an arc spline. And with the arc spline, let's put that into here as well. So we'll just drop that in. So the arc spline, what do we want to do with it? Let's say we take its end angle. And what we're going to control with that, let's say we control a bend deformer with that. So let's move that over here so we can see what we're doing. So we're going to take the bend deformer's strength, and now it's going to be controlled by this. But you can see it's only being controlled slightly. So we need to remap that as well. So this is where the actual remap works. So we're going to enable remap, minimum of 0, maximum of 360, and we'll use include 0. So we'll go back to our arc and we'll control that. And you can see now it's remapping that to 360. So it's really versatile. You can do loads of layering of effects, and then you can also use the built-in drivers, which we'll start looking through in a moment. Okay, the first driver we're going to look at is the noise driver. So if you look at the menu, it's the top one. So let's add the noise. So that's added the driver and all of the driver parameters. So what we're going to do is we're going to drive this object with the noise. So we're going to select our object, make it a child, and then from the object, we're going to choose what parameter we want to drive with it. So I'm going to click the menu and I'm going to say I want to control position and I want to control rotation. Just hide this floor a little bit lower. And we'll drop this down so you can see the pipe object has all of these parameters that are now being controlled by this noise. Now, let's look at the UI a little bit. You can see we have this waveform, and let's just close this up a bit. The waveform is going to show the parameter of what's been driven and how it's been driven over time. So if we adjust this, let's say we look at the detail and just drop that detail down a bit, you can see that this is showing you what that noise is doing, which is quite cool. And we'll push play. So you can see we've got this basic noise, and this actually loops because we've got the blend loop option enabled and auto time. So auto time is using time that we have on the timeline. So if we increase that, it will automatically update it unless you want that off. So if you turn that off, then you can set your own amount of frames that you need. So the noise, we have enabled separate seeds, which means a separate seed from the noise is going to be added per driven parameter. So if I turn that off, we're just going to get a single seed, which means it's going to do the same thing to every parameter, the position and the rotation. But let's have all of our seeds enabled. So we've got a different seed per parameter, which is cool. Now we've also got an output scale, which can control the scale of how much that noise is adjusting the object, as well as amplitude, like that. Let's reset those. Then we have different noise types. So we have a noise, we have turbulence. They're all slightly different. You can see the turbulence has more octaves, and you can change that as well if you want it smoother. And we have wavy turbulence. Again, they're all slightly different types of noises, as well as fractal Brownian motion, which is very detailed noise. And obviously you can scale that down. So if you don't want it so manic, that gives you lots of control. So that's a quick look at the noise driver. Loads of control, and obviously it can drive more things than just an object wobbling around. You can get it to control anything you want. Okay, the next driver we're going to look at is wave. So we're going to go to the add drivers menu and we're going to choose wave. So the wave creates these different types of waveforms. So you've got sine wave, Gaussian, triangle, ramp, square, and pulse. And they all do different types of waveforms that you can use to animate objects. So let's have a look at how we will do it. I'm going to use the cube and this capsule. And first thing we'll do is going to animate the cube going up and down on the y-axis. And then we'll use the height on the capsule. So we'll go to the cube, the coordinates, and we're going to take the y-axis coordinate, drop that as a child of the waveform. And if we push play, you can see it's now creating that animation. If we select this, you can see the waveform. And what we want to do is I'm going to remap this one so that it's got a minimum and max. So I'm going to enable remap, and I'm going to set the minimum -150, maximum 150. So that's the minimum and maximum that this waveform can control this cube. So let's pull out a bit so we can see doing that. So go back to the wave. And this is the sine by default, and you can see it's that really nice up and down curve. If we use our period, we can get less of these. So let's say we want, I don't know, something like 20 of the period, so it's not quite as fast. Something like that. It's nice and smooth. It's cool. Then we can adjust the phase, which is the phase of this waveform over time. So if we move it, you can see it's moving on that wave graph, and you can pick where you want it to start and where you want it to end. Like that. The offset is going to offset the height. And the amplitude as well is also going to control the height. The decay rate is going to decay the wave over time, so it's going to get smaller. So if we increase this, you can see our waveform go from large waves getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And this is really cool if you wanted to do like a bouncing ball that stops bouncing. That's cool. So let's reset these. That is our default. So let's have a look at the other modes. We've got Gaussian, which creates these kind of really nice curving in and out. So you got a bit of a slow on the when it comes to the bottom, it's going to slow down and ramp up. So let's play that. It's cool. And let's say we have a few less of them. Let's go for 30. So 3. So that works really well for that sort of slow down, speed up, slow down, speed up. Then we have triangle, which creates this triangle, which is a bit sharper. There's no easing on that one. A ramp, which is like a sawtooth. Square, so it's basically an on and off. So on, off kind of switch. And then the last one is a pulse, which is these little peaks. So it's going to just pop up, pop down. So they're all really useful depending on the type of waveform you want to use for your animation. So let's just set that one, do one more, and we'll control the capsules, height segments as the height. So drop that in. And I'm going to remap this one as well. So I'm going to remap it to a minimum of 50. So there's always something showing. And let's stretch it to say 400. So that's just going to go. And again, you've got all the control over the sine wave. It's too much. Slow it down. Get like 20 of them. Loads of control. You can layer these up. It was really cool for just on-offs or simple up and down, back and forward, that sort of motion that you're going to get out of a waveform. Next, we're going to look at the value driver. So in this scene, we've got this robot arm with all these parts, and what we're going to do is we're going to build a simple little control rig using value sliders. So we're going to get a value, and you can see the value is a basic slider. Then we have a step, which we'll look at shortly. We have a unit type, so you've got integer, percent, meter, float, and degrees. And then we have a range minimum maximum, and that is the minimum maximum for this slider. So you can see it goes up to 1,000 because that's where we've got it set to. So if you want more, you could, let's say we want a 10,000 range, you can just increase it in the range settings. So we'll reset that to 1,000. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this to build a little rotation rig for parts of this robot arm. So first thing we want to do is change the unit type because we're using rotations. We're going to work in degrees, and we'll put the step at 1. Got minimum, maximum, set that to 0. And the first thing we will do is the middle connector, which is this one. So we want to be able to rotate this with our slider. So we're going to select our collector, go to coordinates, and it's the H. So we're going to grab the H and drop that as a child. So now our slider is going to control that in 360 degrees because that's our settings. Now, if you want a less of a step count, you can set that to, let's say, 0.1, and then it'll give you even finer control of that. But we're going to leave it at 1 because that's enough for this control rig. Let's put that back to 0, and let's rename this one to middle connector. So just so we can keep on top of it because we're going to build quite a lot of these. Let's pull this down. So let's add another one, and we have twist plate, which is another twisting one. So we're going to use the same setup. So degrees, 1, and minus 360 to 360 is fine. So twist plate, let's rename this one then. Twist plate. In fact, let's take out the value in the names so it's cleaner when we're working. The twist plate again is the H. Let's drop that in there. And now our twist plate is going to control that slider. Cool. Then we want one for our main arm joint rotator, which is this one. And you can see when I rotate this, it's controlling the pitch. So we need to set up a pitch slider. So let's get another value. We'll call this one main arm rotator. That. And change this one to degrees. 1. Now I will adjust these, but I'm going to do that once I've enabled the rotation. So let's drag in our pitch. And then we can use the slider to work out what our range is going to be. So let's say that is the maximum, so 49 degrees, or let's put it to 50. So 50 is our max. And our minimum, go down, is going to be somewhere along there. So let's say minus 100 is our minimum. So now our slider can only do that range, which is enough for this arm. Cool. So let's put that to 0. Then we'll do the next arm in the chain. So that's this one. And again, it's pitch as well. Put that. So we do our, let's call this top arm rotator. Set that to degrees. And we'll drop our pitch in here as well. So pitch. And again, with the slider, let's work out our maximum. Minus 33 is our minimum. Maximum was 140. That, yep, perfect. Okay, then let's do our wrist rotator. So another value, same thing, degrees, set that to 1, drop in our wrist rotate, and drop in our pitch for that one as well. Let's set the minimum maximum for this. So this one is the max, is let's say 60, 65, give it a little bit of range, and a minimum down to minus, we'll do minus 65 and 65, that's clean. So there's our minimum and maximum for that one. And then we want one more, and this one is going to be the claw, and the claw's inside of a symmetry, so we've only got one object to control here. So let's set this 0. So we'll do claw. So claw, open, close. It's rotate again, so degrees. And we'll drop in our pitch for that. So, and then we'll work out our max and min. So maximum, open, let's say 80. Maximum of 80. And then minimum is going to be when it's closed. So let's say 0. So 0 to 80 is our slider for the claw. Okay, cool. So now we've got all of these set up. What we don't want is to be having to go through all of these to find this one slider. So the solution for that is to use one of the utilities, and we're going to use the merge utility. So if we get the merge, and all we need to do now with the merge is take all of these and put them as a child. So we'll do middle, twist, main, top, wrist, claw, close that, and then Now if we select our merge, you can see we have our little control rig here. It propagates those value sliders into this single controller. Each of those is its own little control rig, which makes it much more convenient to work with when you're animating these parameters. So you can see we've got a really cool, fun little control rig that we can animate as we need. And this is what the merge driver is used for. It's a utility for the value drivers. Next driver in the list that we're going to look at is the time driver. So we're going to go to our add drivers and we're going to get the time driver. Now the time driver uses time to animate a start and an end of any parameter. You also have a speed, we have a start time, and we have the auto time options where you can retime. So what do we want to do? So we've got this set up here with all these objects, and we're going to create a simple looping animation using these objects. First thing I want to do is I want to rotate this arm here. So that is our top rotate arm, and we're going to make it do this. So it's swinging back and forth. So we've got our time, our arm selected. We're going to go to the coordinates, and we're going to use the banking as our driven parameter. Drop that as a child, and then let's set it up. So rather than going up and staying up, I want it to come back as well. So we're going to load a preset, and we're going to use the Gaussian spline. So now it's going to go up, down, and back. And then what we can do is set our ranges. So let's say it goes back -55 and forward 55. You can see that has also adapted the waveform. If we push play, now we have this simple swinging animation, which is going to loop, which is cool. Okay, now let's set up a few more of these time drivers. So turn that one off, get another one. Let's call this one actually rotate bar. And this one, I'm going to rotate the shape here. I'm just going to rotate that one on its heading. So let's call this one shape. And do the same thing. I'm going to set a... No, I'm not actually. We're going to keep this as a linear. So we're going to reset this spline. So it's a linear spline. Maximum to 360. So it's just going to do a loop. And we'll select our object here. Object. And we're going to do the heading. So let's enable this one. Now you can see that's going to do a 360 loop whilst that bar is going around. Okay, that's cool. Then I'm going to get this spring and I'm going to have it going up and down. So we'll get another time. This one I do want a Gaussian. And let's get our spring. Where's the spring object? Here it is. Helix object. And we're going to use the height so we can control that. So it starts at is set to the minimum. So we want the minimum to be 0. And then when we get to our maximum, which is here, we can time that up to about 200. Oops. Like that. And then it's going to come back down. So we're going to go spring up and spring down. Cool, that's good. And then we'll do one more. Let's call this one spring. And then this one will be ball. And we'll have this pink ball spinning around as well. So the pink ball is a child of a null, and it's the null that we're going to animate. So we're going to animate that one as well. So we're going to do a linear for this one. So reset the spline. And we'll do -360. So it goes the opposite direction just to help break up that all the animation. So go to our coordinates, and this one is also going to be heading like so. So now we've got all these things moving in conjunction. That's looking really cool. Now, one of the cool things we can do with time tracks is we can put them into a sequencer. So we're going to get our sequencer, And we're going to put these as a child of the sequencer. So let's put all these down here. So now with the sequencer selected, you can now see that each of those time tracks has been converted into their own time track here, which is a time bar based on the timeline. So you've got some options. So you can offset the start, which is going to offset the start of each of these tracks, like so, or you can offset the end. But what we need to think about is these tracks are the time animation, and that will happen within the in and out of each of these tracks, which can be moved around. So if you wanted to stagger the animation, you've got full control over each individual time track's timing within the animation. Now, it's not going to work great with this scene, but you can see that each one's going to have its own sort of setup based on those time tracks. So you got loads of control post animation to do staggering or time stretching of each of the animation tracks that you've done within inside of the sequencer, which works with the time driver. Next up is the color driver. So we're going to add that. Go in and add our color driver. So the color driver is a tool to use coloring. So what we can do is with the color driver is we can drive any type of color. So if we select our object, you can see in the basic tab we have the color enabled. So this is the kind of color swatch that we can adjust with the color driver. So simply drag that color in as a child, and you can see straight away the ram skull has been colored. So if we push play, you can see it's going from the green to the pink because we have a start and an end, and the mode is using time. And you can use cycle and random as well. So cycle will cycle through that depending on how long we have with the timeline. Time will use the time, and then random will just randomly pick colors from these two color swatches using a speed. So if we say a speed of 10, you can see it's adjusting those colors based on that speed. If we go to 100, it's going to be a lot quicker, a lot flashier, and you can see it there as well on the waveform. So we won't do that too much more. Okay, so those are the basics. You got the start and end, and then we can change, we'll go back to time, we can change the color mode from color, which is these two swatches here, to gradient, which then gives you a gradient to use the color from. So this color can change anything that has a color swatch. For example, let's drop in a sphere into the scene, like so, and we'll use a redshift material. So let's add another color. Redshift material, we've got our color here, we'll drop that in, we'll put that as a child of a texture onto our sphere, and you can see now the sphere is getting that color. So any object that has a color swatch can be a child of the color driver, and then you can control it with these options. And the final driver we're going to look at in jdDriver is the switch driver. So let's add that. Now the switch driver is just a simple switch. It will turn something on and off, and generally that means it's going to use the Boolean enable and disable of an object or a light in your scene. So what we want to do with it is we want to set up a little blinking animation with these lights. So let's have a look. We've got a switch on time, a switch off time, and a repeat every time. So let's get our red light. With the red light, we're going to go to the basic tab, and we're going to use the enable option in our switch. So turn that on, and let's say we turn it on at 0.5, turn it off at 1. We repeat every 1 second. Actually, let's turn it on in 0 and turn it off at 0.5. So now if we push play, our lights can turn on and turn off. Cool. It's that simple. It's an on and off switch. So let's continue. We'll get switch 2, and we'll do the green light. So let's get its enable. For this one, we are going to, because this one was off at 0.5, so we're going to turn this one on at 0.5, 5, and off at 1. Repeat every 1. And we do the last switch, which is our blue light. That, and then, whoops, not the light, sorry. We want the enable. Okay, so that one, so this one was off at 1, so this one's going to be on at 1, off at 1.5. Repeat every 1. So now they should go on, off, on, off, on, off in sequence. It's red, green, blue, red, green, blue. So you can see it really easy setup to do on, off switch animations using this switch driver. Okay, here we are. We're going to look at JdAniMate. Now, JdAniMate is a really basic tool that lets you animate the start and end of an object's position, scale, and rotation data. So let's have a look at how it works. We have our JdAniMate here, which you can see attributes here. We've got timing and an objects list. And then we've got this simple phone model. So what we're going to do is drop that into the objects list. And you can see that now populates some options. So we have a store start, store end, and clear stored. And these are the buttons that you use to store where you want your object to start and where you want your object to end. So let's say we're going to use the starting position as it is here. So the phone's going to sit here and then it's going to lift up and do a simple twist. So we'll store the start. And you can see two things have happened. It's created a highlighted icon here, which means the start data is stored. And it's created a wireframe, and that wireframe is just showing you the start of where the object is in the animation. Now, let's say we want to change its position, so we're going to move it up in space, something like 200 or so, and we're going to rotate it, so we're going to rotate it down and around, maybe a little bit of banking as well, something like that. So it's a simple lift off and twist animation. We'll go back and we'll store the end. And you can see now it's showing you the start and end position and a track, which is this pathway here. Now, if these get too much, you can simply go to the display and turn these off. Keep the path there for now. So if I push play, you can see we've got our simple animation, which is looking cool. Now let's say I want a bit more time on the timeline. If I go change the time to 5 seconds or frames if you're in frames, go back to the object, we have this auto time option here. So if we scroll that down, you can see that now the end time has changed to 5. So this animation is going to take the whole 5 seconds. But if I want a bit of a hold on the end, we can turn that off. And let's say it finishes at 4. That gives us a bit of a handle on the end. So we've got our animation for 4 seconds, and then it's going to hold. So that's cool. What if we want to adjust the timing? So we've got our timing spline here, and that's going to let you do the easing in, or you can do fast, slow, or anything you want to do with that. So let's say we want it to go off a bit quicker, something like this. And then it's going to ease back into the rest of that animation like that. Okay, and then slow down. So you've got loads of control of the animation just with this one spline. But we can also adjust other things. So if we close these down, go into our tracks, we now have a track for the position, scale, and rotation as well. So if we want to offset, so let's say we want the rotations to happen slightly later, we can just adjust this track. And now the rotations aren't going to happen straight away, then they're going to start later on, which is pretty cool. Something like that. Let's set this back as well. Let's remove that. So our rotation's slightly offset, going to kick in a bit slower. So you've got loads of control over the really simple start and end of where your object wants to animate. But you can also, if you're not happy with something, let's go back to our coordinates. Let's say I don't really like the rotations, for example. We can untick the end stored information, and then we can adjust it again. So let's say we'll go back to 12 frame 0. let's say the position is a bit higher, and let's say we could even scale it up a little bit. So if we scale it down from the beginning and then scale that up, that's going to be quite cool. Now rotation, let's rotate it right down almost, something like that. And then we'll store that end information again. Now our phone's going to do the scaling as well as the rotation. So loads of control, really easy and simple tool set. And that's how you would work with a single object. And next we'll look at how to use an object with a hierarchy of pieces. So here we have our carabiner model, which you can see is built up of a bunch of different parts. And we're going to put that into the objects list. So we have all the same options. However, one thing that we do have with a object made up of parts is variations. So what we'll do is, let's say this is our end. So it's all built and that's where we want it to end. So let's store our end first. And let's turn those displays off so we can see our object better. Then we're going to move a few things around. So let's say we move it up. And we also rotate it. So let's rotate it like so. Something like that. It's fine. And then we're going to start playing with the variations. So let's say it splits apart randomly in different places, something like that. And you can do sequence and you can also constrain it per axis. But we'll just keep it all random for this one. And the same with the rotations. So let's do some random rotations in there as well. And we'll store this as our start. So now our pieces are going to all pull together and reform our object. Like so, which is cool. And this also works with clones. So if you've got a bunch of clones, you can do that. So let's quickly set that up. I'll hide this from the hierarchy from our scene. And we'll get just a simple cube. Put that into a cloner, and let's do a grid. So I only want 3 in there. Okay. So if we drop our cloner in there, we get the same options. So you can control their offsets, their individual scales, and their rotations as well. So that works really cool with different cloner setups. So we'll remove that, go back to our scene. That. So we've got that and it's animated, and let's just change the timing. Let's put that back to, let's say 3. So it's a bit quicker. So as that crashes down. So that's cool. And you can see that it's created this linear animation between the start and the end positions. Now, what if we want to have rotation coming from our parents? So what we can do is let's unclick that start and let's animate rotation on the parent object as well as the variations. Let's store this again. So it's still going to be linear, still going to be quite crazy. However, if we enable effect position, we now get the position of what the parent is, which is this parent null. And you can see it's changed the pathways to these really cool curved pathways, and our object will now fly around based on that. So let's hide those again. So, and then we can got that really cool animation, which is cool. And again, if you want to adjust timings, you can do that with the timing spline. You can use the tracks as well. So if you don't want the rotations to happen straight away, you can just offset those. You can offset them either side or put them in the middle. It's an animation track. So you can see you get a bit more control with that. So let's put those back to 0. And lastly, if we go to our display tab, we have the display for the start and end, which is the wireframe. We also have an export spline, and that's going to export these splines. So we export that, open up our thing, we see we have this animation path. And the animation path is now a spline, and that spline can be used for anything inside of Cinema 4D as you would expect. Okay, here we are. We're going to look at JdGeoRoll. We have our GeoRoll object in the scene, some scene objects we want to roll, and some colliders. So looking at the attributes, we have an objects list. This is where we can drop our object into. Colliders list for collision objects. We have gravity, and the gravity by default is set to world -y. You also have local, and we have custom and object. And custom gives you a vector. So if you want your objects to roll up a wall, for example, you could set the X or the Z plane using just, if you set this to 1, then the X plane is now the gravity direction. So we'll reset that. An object uses an object, and we'll look at that in a moment. Moving on, we have a store start and clear start buttons. These are used if you need to store a specific orientation to your object before the animation kicks in. You want to store that start, you just click this and that will store that data, and then you can clear it if you need to. Virtual floor is what you can see here, is just an icon that shows the virtual floor. The floor is actually the entire world y-axis 0 plane is the entire floor used by GeoRoll, and you can show the icon or color it. So we'll leave those on, and let's add our objects. So if we drop our cube in, you can see that the cube is added. We also have this new handle object as a child of the GeoRoll, and it's given us this display around the cube. We have these new options that are available per object, and these are just options for the handles. So you have the show handle or hide. We have auto size, which bases its size around the bounding box of the object as it rolls, so that will be adaptive as it moves. And then we have a handle. So let's just color these as we go so that they match the geometry. I'm just going to select that blue, and then you can see it's colored the handle and also colored it in the objects manager, so it's easy to see. Let's drop in our platonic, do the same thing. We'll select the color palette and just select that. I'm going to use auto size on this one just so it makes that a bit smaller. And we'll drop in our torus. Do the same thing, color that so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so they're added, and now all you need to do to get the animation is select the object that you want to animate. So let's say we select the handle for this one, move it around, and you can see automatically it's giving us our cool rolling. So that looks ace, and the same with all of them. They're all now set up, ready to roll around as you need them to. Move this one so you can change. Wheels are really cool because you can change them to do like flopping over like that, or actually rolling around their axes, which is cool. So that's that. And then we've got the colliders. So by default, you've got the world as the collider, the world floor, or you can add some. So let's say we've got this landscape. We're going to drop that in there. Let's get our torus, and now that's going to roll over that landscape like that. So scene geometry all works as cool colliders as well. Now, if you want something slightly more advanced, like your object goes around something, this is where you would actually use the object option. So let's put that back in there and clear it from the colliders list. I'm going to turn off the virtual floor. And I'm going to we'll use our cube. So get the cube, and let's just put our cube into world 0. Like that. The cube as well. Fix the orientation. Okay, and then we're going to, in our GeoRoll, got this tube here. So let's say we want it to roll around this tube. So let's change it to object. We'll drop in our tube. Let's get our cube handle. And now it's rolling around that surface. Let's just orientate it better. Something like that. and then you can roll it around this object as well. Loads of control, very fun animating these things. Next, we're going to look at Jidou FlowCam. Jidou FlowCam is a procedural camera animation tool. So let's have a look at what we've got. So here we are in our scene. We've got our FlowCam object, we've got our attributes here on the side, and we've got some options straight away. So we've got our time as the other Jidou tools. We have our mode, and the default mode is connect points, which we'll look at shortly. And then we have paths, and we'll look at that after we've looked at the connect points. So we have our camera link, so you can drop a camera in there or you can add one. And then our points, track view, which is a GUI that will show you where the timings are and other things like that. Then our various options for each camera point. So let's add a camera. Now, if we look at our menu, you can add a default camera, which is the standard camera, or you can add a redshift camera. If you're going to use other render engines, you'll want to use the standard camera and put the render engine tag on that camera. So let's drop that in there, and you can see it creates this camera. It also creates a camera point, and you can see that camera point here in the object manager. So the camera point, when selected, all of these options will be available to it. And that camera point 1 is the start position of our camera. The camera also has this red frame, which is the aspect ratio and framing for title and action save. So we'll look at those in a bit. So let's add another point and move that across. You can see it's created another camera point and path. So we'll add a couple more. So let's add one and one more. So you can see we've got our 4 camera points, and I've just moved those in a linear line. And if we push play, the camera is just going to simply move between each of those points as you would expect. So let's go back and we'll look at how these work. So each of these points is a camera point and a camera object here, and you can move those. You can see the spline will update. So let's take this one and let's move it forward. Something like that. And then our camera path is now this nice sweeping arc, which our camera will simply move down. That's cool. So we've got our points and our track, and if you look at the track, you can see each point, there's a white bar, and that white bar, when we move our timeline, is the time. And then we have each point here, which is the distance between each of these camera points. So you can see this one's green, and that's because it's selected. So they'll change to green when they're selected. So let's go to point 2, which is this one here, and we'll go to the camera point tab, and we'll look at the options. So first we have the show cone. So if we enable that, you can see it's going to show the camera cone for that particular camera point. And then we've got different options. So we can change the focal length. Let's say we want to have a 70 mil on this camera point. So if you go back, you can see it starts at the 35, comes down, changes to a 70, and then it'll go back to whatever the next point is. And that's the same with the focal distance. So we'll put that back to 35. Let's turn off our cone. Now this will also update if this is angled. So let's say we angle it and we want it to be pointing up. So the camera goes and looks at something up there. So you can see it goes up there and then goes back to that one. So let's set that back. Then we have a weight, and the weight is the timing between points. So if we've got this one selected, it then becomes the timing either side. So if we increase the weight and we look at this here, you can see how it's stretching that time. It also means that there's less time for the other camera points. So you've got to be careful about what you're going to do here. So it just means that there's more time between these two than there is between these two, depending on your needs. There's also a tension, and the tension will mean you can create a hard in and out of that point there. So it's going to linear in, linear out, and then go back into the curve. Okay, let's set 0. We have a slide, and the slide is again where it is in the time. So you can just slide that So it's closer to the beginning, so there's less time between that and that. So it's fast there, and it'll slow down. Okay, so let's put that back to 0. You have an ease, and the ease is going to create an ease into this point. So if we increase the ease, whoops, that's the slide. If we increase the ease, you can see that now creates this ease spline in, which means it's going to slowly get to it and then move on. Cool. And if you want it to ease out, you then select the next point on the chain and create an ease for that one as well. So you can see it eases in and eases out, which makes it a bit smoother. So we'll go back to point 2. Then we have hold. And if we increase the hold time, if we look at our display here again, increase the hold time, you can see it's creating this hold space. And now that means that the camera is going to go into this space and sit there before it comes out again. So let's play that. It's going to sit there and then come out again. And you can do that for every point. We also have a spring option, so you can spring that to the point. So it's going to go in, go just a little bit of a springy motion there. What we can do is just speed that up a bit. So let's get camera point 2. We'll slide that across so it goes into there quicker and you get a better spring. That's way too much, as you can imagine. So we'll drop that down. And you get a nice little bit of a spring in and out. So let's undo all this. And carry on. So that is the basics of each point's tools. We then have motion, and the motion is just going to give you some wobble. So if we enable that, I'll increase all of these so that it's more obvious. And let's set these to 3. And we'll increase the frequency. So you can just see, gives you that sort of wobbly cam motion if you need it. So let's undo all of these. And then we have some banking. And the banking we'll show shortly, but it's an automatic banking system. Okay, so we also have an easing global spline, which is this global spline here, which is the animation path. So if we want them to ease in at the beginning and ease out at the end, you can simply adjust that there. Let's slow it in, transitions to those, and then slowly comes out. It's cool. It's nice. We also have an up vector option. So depending on what you need your vector for your camera to be, you can adjust that here. So that's the basics of how to set it up. And obviously it's going to work depending on your shot, how you want the camera to be. So there's a lot of control, just adding as many points as you need for your shot. Next, we have the different modes. So what we're going to do is going to hide these camera points. I'm going to change the mode. So I'm going to go to path. We can see it's now created this circle path because that's the default shape. So if we look at that, it's just going to create this circle and the camera's going to go around that circle. We also have alignment options for the path. So if we want our camera to be, let's say, positive Z, so that it's more tangential around that path, you just change the orientation like that. Let's undo that and change the shapes. So we've got a circle, we have an arc, which creates an arcing path like that. We have a line, which just creates a line. And there's also position, rotation, and length options for these. So if you want a sort of a boom shot where your camera goes up like that, really simply add that using the line shape. We have a helix as well. Now undo those rotations. So it's going to go around the helix, which obviously has its own controls for the height and the radius, depending on your shot, which is cool. And then we have a custom link as well. So let's say we want something different. Let's say this shape here. Just drop that inside into there, and now the camera path is our custom spline. Very cool. So that is the path mode. Next, we're going to have a look at targets. So let's go back to our connect points. We'll take out that end side and bring these back in. And what I'm going to do is just reposition all of these back into the Z0, just so we have a linear. So we have a camera path going across there, and we have our target options. The target options are all within this tag here. Now you can do several things. You can either add a target, or you can drop in objects as you need them, your own target objects. So we're just going to use the add target. So we add a target, and as you'd expect, that target is now our object. But what we can do with this tool is we can use multiple targets. So let's add 3. So we're going to add second one here. Let's move this, and let's move it up over here, and then we'll add one more, and we'll put this one somewhere different. Let's say it's over here and down, something like that. So what we want to do is we want to chain the targets so that the camera can change to when you need them with your timing. So if we go back to our tag, you can see we have the same kind of setup as we do here. We've got our position of our targets and an easing spline. So if we say target 1, let's hold that for let's say 2 seconds. So now it's going to sit and hold on that target for 2 seconds, and then it's going to transition, as you can see here, to the next target. So let's make the next target transition slightly quicker, so we can move that position like that. So you can now play, it's going to go there, it's going to transition to the next target, hold, and we want it to hold on that. So let's again put some hold, and see how we've increased that hold. It's also shortened that transition time. So adjust that as you need, something like that. So it's going to sit on 1, transition to 2, hold on there, and then slow transition to 3. So let's speed that up again. We'll move that over to get a similar sort of distance, and it's on there at the end, so it's going to hold on that one anyway. So we go 1, transition to 2, hold on there, transition to 3, hold on there. So you get loads of control with this targeting system. It's really cool. And obviously these can be animated targets. These can be custom targets, depending on what you need. Is a really powerful targeting system for your camera. There's a couple more things we want to look at, and one of them is the banking. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to get rid of all of these targets and take them out of the hierarchy. Don't need those. Going to the flow cam points, and let's just create something where the camera has quite a bit of arcing motion. And rotate these so they're kind of all going towards each other. Something like that. And let's get the first one pointing in the right sort of direction as well. Okay, so the camera's going like that, which is cool. Let's have a look at the banking. The first thing I'm going to do, so the first thing we want to do is something like that. So that one goes down there, cruises around. Let's just make sure all of these have nice alignment to their next point. So like that looks good. Is we want it to animate the banking of the camera. So we'll go to the banking tab, enable banking, and you can see straight away it's got this angle here, and it's automatic based on the direction it's going. So there's a minimum and max sensitivity and an ease in out of each banking. So if we push play, you can see it's going to go like that, come around here, then it's going to bank back that way. Okay, that's that. Let's turn that off. And then the next thing is we'll go to the display tab, and there's some options here. So we have our path color, which is this path here. We can display it or hide it. Color of the cam points, color of the camera. So it's a blue one here. We have export spline like the other tool. So if we enable export spline, there's now a procedural spline under here. And wherever you update these camera points, the spline will also update. So you can use that for rendering effects or adding other objects along paths, whatever you need to do with that exported spline if you need it. And then looking at our aspect ratio, you can see we have it set to 16 by 9 and the aspect is 1920 by 1080. Now, ratio fit means that it's going to fit the ratio of your scene, or you can use absolute size as well. We'll leave it on ratio fit, but let's say we have some random, let's say 1920 by 1920 scene, and you can see you've got the camera set to that. Then the HD 16:9 is where you want it to be, and then you can enable all the other ones. So you got square ratio and mobile ratio, and it's going to show you where to frame those. If you do absolute, it'll put those in an absolute format. So let's look through our camera. So you can see we've got the full 1920 by 1920, got our HD, we've got square in the middle, which is 1080 by 1080, and then we've got a mobile format, which is 1080 by 1920. So this just helps frame your shot up. Depending, you might want to do a big render and get all of these in one shot, so this just helps with that sort of thing. And finally, we're going to look at the last tool in the toolkit, and that is Jidou GeoFlow. And GeoFlow is very much the same as the Jidou FlowCam tool. It has the same options, but this time, rather than using a camera, we can do it with geometry or objects. So let's have a look. So we've got this capsule, and we're going to create a little animation path for it. So we're going to drag that into the objects, select it, and you can see we have these same parameters as the FlowCam. So let's add some flow points, and you see, move those, and we have these little waypoints, and the object will simply just animate between these. So we'll add a few more, create a cool little animation path. And obviously you can add as many or as few as you want, depending on what you want your object to do. So I'm just going to move some of these around. Something like that, and get a nice little arc happening over here. Let's select two, something like that. Okay, so there's our first point, and it's going to just spin around. So obviously it's going to follow that path, but we don't really want it just sticking up like that. We want it to be tangential. So to do that, go to our object, we want it to be plus Z, so object, plus Z, and then in the orientation, we're going to change the align axes to plus Z as well. So now our object's nice and tangential, following our little path. And obviously it's fully procedural. If you move a flow point, it will update our path and keep going because it's a procedural toolset. Okay, so each of these flow points have the same type of options as FlowCam, so you can weight the tension, slide, ease them in and out, hold, and spring. So you've got loads of control of how your object follows this path. And we also have a deformation option. So let's go here, enable deform, and you can see now our object is deforming to the path, which is really cool for organic things as well. Going into display, we have the same options again, the path, color, and flow point color, and an export spline. So we have the spline path. Again, it's procedural. If these update, the path updates, and this can be animated, rendered, or anything you need it to be. And like the FlowCam tool, if we go back to object mode, we have our paths. So you can change this to be paths as well. And then it will flow around these preset path shapes. It's the helix, like so. Custom as well, and it also has the banking. So if we select that, select our capsule, so you can see the axes, you can see that it's banking along that helix. So it's a very fun little toolkit. It enables you to do procedural path animations for objects. And this will be coming into our new Jidou toolset very soon.